Welcome to Becoming the Business. I work a lot with business owners who know that marketing is something that's required and I think have a general idea of what it is, but most people don't see marketing as an investment, where we unpack the messy, meaningful side of building something real. And then often it's kind of outsourced because, business owners aren't generally specialists at marketing.
We're Caroline and Liska, coaches, thinkers, and longtime friends, having honest conversations about work, identity, leadership, and everything in between. How do you manage the balance of this is the marketing, these are the leads I'm going to be generating, and this is the service delivering I'm going to provide? Should you have a plan B in place? Should you have done your research?
Whether you're growing a business, navigating change, or figuring out who you are in the process,
You're in the right place.
This is Becoming the Business. Hi Caroline, how are you doing?
Good morning. I'm so well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a good week. So I thought today we could talk about marketing.
Yes.
I work a lot with business owners who know that marketing is something that's required and I think have a general idea of what it is, but most people don't see marketing as an investment. It's usually seen as an expense.
Yeah.
And then often it's kind of outsourced because, business owners aren't generally specialists at marketing. And yeah, I've been curious to find out from you what your journey's been like around marketing, figuring it out. What have you learned? What are some of the mistakes that you've made, or what has your experience been around outsourcing it?
So I would say, first of all, that my respect for marketing has grown significantly. I probably had no idea what marketing actually is. And it's actually a multi-level system. So that's the first thing I would say, is that as I've had to think about putting marketing strategies into the businesses, I've grown, like my respect for the industry has grown as well. So I would say that there's, as I said, different levels in marketing. And the first thing you need to look at is a strategy. So every time you are doing some sort of marketing, especially if it's paid, you need to understand how you're going to get your return on investment in paid marketing. So I think there's strategy, and then there's social media, and then there's all the different types of marketing types that you can do. And it's probably best to pick one or two that you feel is industry specific to the industry that you're in. And then talk to people who know what they're doing and have some expertise. So take your time choosing your person that you're going to be using. Yeah.
So one of the things about marketing is understanding where it fits in the sort of development of your business. So normally what we recommend is that people start by establishing the goal of the business, where you want to go with it, and then figuring out how you're going to deliver your product or your service, and doing that consistently and making sure that you're productive and efficient and you have enough competency in your business to actually deliver your product, and enough structure and kind of regularity in your business. Marketing is kind of the second step in building your business. So first get some kind of product and service and start selling it, getting it out there. And once that base is formed, then marketing is kind of the next layer. It's the part where, when you have a structure and a kind of mastery over your business in terms of delivery, then marketing is kind of the thing that starts to bring cash flow into your business. And so usually when people start, even if let's say you're baking biscuits and selling them from home, you would be doing that for a couple of months and realizing there's a demand for this. Now I want to maybe make a label for my biscuits that I'm selling. So then you would start with branding. You would think about, what are you going to call your biscuit business? How do you want it to look out there in the market? So establishing a brand around your product or service is the first component. And then once you've developed a brand, a kind of persona in the space that you're operating in, then you want people to hear about it and know more about it. And the more people that hear and know about it, the more ideally sales you'll get. And so really understanding that marketing is something that comes sort of as the business is functional and operating. And the more marketing you do, the more business you will get. The more people know about your product or service, the more interest you'll get. And so recognizing that if you're not ready to receive the demand that marketing creates, you're going to let customers down. So it's really important to structure business with the ability to respond to marketing when you start putting yourself out there.
So how do you manage that? Because if you're by yourself and you obviously trying to get leads in and you're trying to get some clients, so you start by doing that, and then how do you prepare the second half? How do you manage the balance of this is the marketing, these are the leads I'm going to be generating, and this is the service delivery I'm going to be providing? Should you have a plan B in place? Like, should you have done your research? Either you need another staff member or another system in place before you start marketing, or how does that come hand in hand?
It is a bit of an iterative thing. You have to figure it out because you can't, set up a whole lot of systems and put things in place when you're not actually generating an income, unless you have a major investor who is funding the startup. Then you can have a budget for marketing. You can employ a marketing or business development manager. But a lot of people start their businesses, sort of garage-based businesses, with what they have in their hands, and so the marketing component, that's why it's kind of the next layer of the business, is that once there is some money coming in, you can begin to allocate a budget to marketing. And sort of the benchmark budget is you wanting to spend about 5% of your turnover on marketing. That's kind of a good benchmark to look at. So allocating 5% of what you're currently making to start doing some marketing activity. And then as you market and you get more demand, you sell more and your turnover increases, and so your marketing budget increases with that. And so you're constantly allocating an amount to invest in marketing, which helps you to structure for growth, as opposed to spending a lot of money on marketing but you don't have the capability to then meet the demand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. So in terms of a process, so if you've got someone who hasn't really played properly with marketing, how should they go about it? So do you recommend that they find a person who's going to look at their strategy and then say, okay, maybe try these two paid options that would suit your industry, and then test and measure, and then figure out, obviously you need to know your numbers, you need to see what's working, and then take it from there?
Again, it depends on budget. So I always say either you have to spend the time yourself learning how to do marketing, reading books about it, learning what strategy you're going to implement. Anyone can learn that. It just takes time. Or you can spend money on a service provider that's already skilled, already has experience, already understands the market. And so it totally depends on where the person is starting, what the starting point is for that particular business. So for smaller businesses where it's more of a startup, garage-based business, usually I would say you are having to find the business, which is the marketing component, and do the business. And so it's a bit of a seesaw. You're going, find the business, do the business, find the business, do the business. And the find the business part is the marketing part. And then do the business is the operations delivery, making sure that the product or service gets to the demand. So whereas if you have an idea that you've developed, you've created a business plan, you've gone to pitch this business plan to an investor. Within that business plan, there is a budget for marketing. You can then employ someone. So it totally depends on the starting point. But either way, marketing has to be part of the strategy of the business. You can't grow your business without marketing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've learned as time's gone on. And I would probably say that I did the whole learn about marketing myself situation. And the thing is, doing it that way, you make a lot of mistakes, and they're pretty costly as well. And it's because all these paid platforms change all the time. It's quite difficult to stay on top of things and to actually be able to test long enough to see any results. So it's a tricky. I find that area within your business is tricky when you're solo trying to get everything done.
It is really tough.
Mm.
Again, most businesses will initially start by outsourcing it to someone who is a specialist within that capability. The challenge with that is finding a service provider that's really invested in your business. So the reality is that most marketing agencies out there are there to make money for themselves. And so how do you ensure that your business is top of mind, your business is properly understood, and that you're getting a return on the investment you're making? And that's where I always say to business owners, you have to understand what marketing is when you're outsourcing it so that you can manage your service provider correctly, because otherwise you leave it, almost abdicate the responsibility of marketing to an outsourced service provider, but they don't necessarily deliver on the service level agreement unless they're being managed just like an employee. And that's often where I see business owners, they're spending money unnecessarily on marketing, but they're not getting any return for it. And so then it's an expense anyway, whether you're spending the time or the money. And that's really what I want to encourage business owners to avoid, is being astute enough to understand what you're expecting from your service provider to make sure you're getting bang for your buck.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people start with thinking of my logo and what I'm going to look like, and they spend a lot of time on that, and it kind of stops there. And so I feel that there's a rabbit hole that you can go down with marketing agencies or marketing personnel, which is basically the whole brand thing. It's necessary, but if you're starting with that, you're going to potentially spend a lot of money on things that aren't going to give you a return on your investment. So it's a tricky one. I really find it's difficult because you do need a brand, you need to be put out there, but allocation of budget should probably, when you're starting out, should not be put into that basket totally, and then start thinking about, right, okay, how am I going to get my messaging across? And I've had the experience of using marketing agencies who just would produce pretty pictures with the wrong copy, so the messaging was completely wrong, so it didn't appeal to anybody, my ideal clients or anything. It was just pretty pictures being put out, and that was it. And so so there are lots of potential mistakes that you could be making.
I think what you're highlighting there are a couple of things, but the one thing that's really important is recognizing how much we can build a business in fantasy. And that's where the branding exercise comes in. Many people spend hours, like you say, on designing a brand, and it's a safe thing. You're not really out there. You're creating something sort of in secret, and you can kind of enjoy the idea of the business, and it feels lovely because you feel like you're doing something, but you're not actualizing it in delivery. So branding is quite seductive in that sense, because you can get lost in the world of colors and shapes, and it's playful, and it's creative, it's really fun, but it doesn't necessarily get you to the point of actually delivering something. And that's why I always say, start with the delivery first. First, start selling something. Put something out there. See whether there's any kind of response. Brands can be evolved. You can rebrand. You can, that is something that can happen over time. Being clear about your vision and your mission is important, and that's part of the base, but that doesn't necessarily have to immediately be interpreted into a brand. That can come over time. I always say it's a bit like if you're having a baby, you don't know what the personality of the child is going to be until it's about 2 or 3 years old. And it starts with conception, with the pregnancy, then you name it. But even when you name it, it doesn't really feel like it fits the name initially. You have to consciously call the child that name before it really sits well with you, never mind when the child actually responds to that name when you call it. So the business journey is very similar to that. First, make the baby, feed it, help it dress, do all those things, and then the personality will emerge. And that's really where the brand comes in. And that's when marketing can become authentic, is because you're actually selling something that already has a name, an identity, a presence in the market.
So would you say there's a method? So if you're saying 5% of your revenue should be going into marketing, of that 5%, would you say spend, I don't know, 10% of that 5% on your brand, make sure that's sorted, then pick a couple of paid methods of doing the advertising, and maybe spend 60% of that, of your budget on that, and then have someone who oversees the entire strategy? Is there a way you would split that 5% that would make sense?
Again, it depends on the timing of your business. Initially, if you're selling your bag of biscuits, you're going to be putting it on Facebook, maybe doing some paid ads before you even have a brand. You're like, hi, I'm Liska, I'm selling biscuits. Do you want to buy them from me? You know, there's no brand attached to that. You have a product. And so you might start with just a small activity that is selling the product specifically. Let's talk about how you started your tech company. Let's talk about how you started engaging with marketing. What was the first thing you did when you realized, oh, I need to do some marketing? What was the first thing you instinctively did?
So me personally, started locally, going to talk to people, joining groups, and I haven't spent a lot of money on the branding and the logos and things like that. It's literally just been almost validating the idea out first. But what I have done is, in healthcare, I've spent a lot more of our budget on marketing now after 10 years, because it's now time to, this word of mouth in a small town gets you places. But I was actually curious as to how, now that I've got a better understanding of marketing strategies and marketing, how it would affect the business in healthcare as well. So I think it's an interesting position to be in, to have a budget, to see how far it can go and what return on investments you can get for an established business, and then a startup where your budget is really minimal. You've got to have different tactics and different strategies.
So again, you're explaining what we've been talking about, or giving, I suppose, life to it through your examples. The one is, you managed to build a business over the last 10 years without too much marketing, other than network marketing and relationship marketing.
Yeah.
So your healthcare business was built primarily on relationships. You worked as a service provider in a hospital for a long time, first as an employee, then you went on your own and started building your own business. And that was established through relationship marketing. You went to different practitioners, announced your service, offered your service, provided the service, and that became associated with your name, which is your brand in that particular context. And so relationship marketing is probably one of the first kinds of marketing you would do, where you're going to someone, you're building you know me, now you like me, now you trust me, and now you will buy from me. And so that's the primary beginning form of marketing, is through a relationship. The friend down the road will buy my biscuits from me because she knows me.
Yeah.
She trusts that my kitchen is clean and safe, and she likes me, and she likes the fact that when she comes to my house, she smells the smells out of my kitchen. So therein lies the fundamental marketing principle, is sell to someone you know, who likes you and trusts you, and actually, very simply, get 10 people who know, like, and trust you, and slowly those 10 people become raving fans of your product until another 10 people, and then you have a business.
Yeah, and so I often think that that's the block. So I have young adult children who think that businesses probably are quite easy to start because they've seen how their friends' parents have done it and all that kind of stuff. But actually, I'm like, when I said to them, okay, well, your lowest hanging fruit is your audience that you have as friends, and you go out there and you just say, this is what I'm doing. Do you know anybody who would benefit from this? And then you take it from there. But that takes courage to just actually put yourself out there in the first place. So if you can overcome that and just go ahead and do that, then you're completely right. And then you need to understand how to look after the people that are paying you to provide a service or a product or things like that.
I mean, from my own experience, also having been in the sort of more healthcare clinical setting, where most of my initial referrals came from doctors, and that was actually really easy. I didn't have to sell myself, and it was a service that was in demand, and there was more demand than there was supply. So getting business initially was really easy, and then over time having clients who benefited from the service and stayed for a long time in a process. From a coaching perspective, the sell is very different because a lot of people don't really understand what it is. There's a lot of different terms around coaching. There's life coaching, there's health coaching, there's business coaching. People don't really know what to expect. It's not a known concept like seeing a physiotherapist or seeing a GP or seeing a psychologist even. And so there's a much more of a sales process involved there, even in the beginning. And part of the challenge around that is you don't want to necessarily tell people that they're failing and they need some help. And actually that's the perception out there, is that when you're seeing a coach, it's because you're making too many mistakes and you need to be fixed. And so I think in every industry, it's trying to figure out, what kind of marketing is required to really help the customer understand the product. So education is a fundamental part of marketing in the beginning, is educating your customer to understand what the product is and why it would be beneficial to them, why they would experience the benefits of the product or service that you're offering. I'm curious, you mentioned, on the one hand, having budget after a 10-year business and then being able to start investing in marketing and testing and measuring. And then on the other hand, a startup where there isn't necessarily a lot of budget. What have you been learning around the startup space, and what are some of your key takeouts around your learnings in a startup space?
So I think it works. First of all, you need to be patient, but you need to be able to communicate properly. So if you are the person going out there who is having to educate people about something, especially if it's new and no one really understands it, you've got to spend a lot of time on your pitches and how you verbalize what you're trying to achieve and why they should choose your services over someone else's. So I think the key is communication and your copy if it's written material. So you've got to spend a lot of time making sure that it's simple, but it's understood and it's doing what it's supposed to do, which is explain and educating people about what it is that you're offering.
So, therein lies perhaps the next step, is after a while of doing the relationship marketing, you kind of want to point people somewhere so that you're not the only person doing the marketing, because that can't be scaled necessarily. You can only talk to so many people at a time. So that's where digital marketing becomes the second phase in your marketing journey, is first establish product, get it out there through relationship, and then begin to build a scalable system around marketing. And so the next step is to create a digital presence or a shop front of some kind. And so therefore a website, an email address that's not liskamiller@gmail.com, starting to build some kind of separateness into the business and putting an identity out there. And so that's where the digital marketing journey begins. I think, most people will probably know this, but it's also understanding that there are different types of marketing. There's the more hunting strategy, which is the relationship marketing component. You identify a key person you want to work with or sell to, and you target them very specifically. The farming approach is much more long-term and sort of drip-fed. You plant a seed, you water it, you wait for it to grow, it grows, you wait for the fruit to be there, you pick the fruit, then you sell the fruit. It's a much longer process as opposed to, I want that deer, I'm going to target and hunt that thing. So understanding that over time you begin to build different strategies that facilitate both immediate marketing activity and more long-term marketing activity.
So where do people go wrong, or what do you find with your clients that you're coaching? What is it that they often need to look at carefully when you're talking to them about marketing?
So there's this principle of first understanding your goal, and then knowing the culture of your business, and then building a brand around that. So really representing your business authentically in the market, because that's actually what people are attracted to. Because there are 100 bags of biscuits out there that people can buy. There are, 100 coaches out there. There are 100 tech companies. There are 100 physiotherapists out there that people could buy from. And so marketing is really about differentiation. It really is about showing the world out there what makes you different from all the competition out there. Why should people buy from you as opposed to anyone else? And so people go wrong with marketing because they just do the generic, like you said, create pretty pictures and pluck them out there onto some social media site, or flyers or banners or whatever it is that you choose to do, whether it's outdoor branding or decals on your office, or whatever form of marketing you end up doing. It's a waste of money if you're just doing marketing for the sake of, I've now spent money on marketing. It has to be associated with how I'm differentiating myself. And, the USP, what is your unique selling proposition? And if you haven't identified that, then you're just communicating, you're making noise out there. No one's really going to hear the truth of what you're trying to sell. And that takes a bit of work. It takes thinking, it takes, grappling a little bit with something creative, and really, again, showing how what you offer adds value in a way that no other competitor can. So marketing is an investment when you've paid attention to that detail and then targeted at the right customer. So it's differentiation, and then it's about who are you targeting that marketing at? Because again, it will just be noise if you're putting differentiated marketing out, but not to the people who would buy that. So it's absolutely critical to identify, who do you want to sell to? Do I want to sell biscuits to 5-year-olds outside their play school? Or do I want to sell it to grannies? Or do I want to sell to, students? It's really becoming clear about who are you selling your product to, and then placing the marketing in a position where they see that. And therein lies the magic.
So how much time do you spend with your clients going through the importance of marketing and how they can use marketing to their advantage?
It's something that, again, in the process of business growth, comes second. So the first thing is always making sure that the business is structured in such a way that when we market, the business can respond to the growth, the increased demand. It's no use that we go straight into marketing and spend time on that and money on that when there's no infrastructure to then respond to the demand. And so it is a bit of a both and. We constantly are looking at delivery and, capability, and then marketing, and then we build a little bit by little bit. So it's not one or the other, but fundamentally we have to ensure that there's enough infrastructure in place to then respond to the demand that marketing will create. So it's an ongoing thing, and I think that's often where businesses make mistakes, is they think, okay, I'm going to do some marketing, and then they stop. Then they service that demand, and then suddenly the business runs dry, and then they're like, oh sure, but we must do marketing again. So then they do marketing, and then they deliver on the service, and then there's no business again. And that's why I always say you have to understand that delivery and marketing must work hand in hand, and they both are perpetual activities in a business, which is why I say you have to allocate 5% of your budget to marketing, which means it's always there. The spend is always there. It has to always be happening. As much as delivery is happening, marketing needs to be happening. And those two things have to be built into the business for it to become sustainable. That's where we start having a stable business, is where the two are working hand in hand. But most business owners go, okay, I've got a little bit of money, I spend money on marketing, and then I'll work, and then I go, oh no, there's no more work. Okay, I quickly do marketing.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. You've got to look at both of those together, because often there's going to be a bottleneck. And so it's either you're the bottleneck, or your service provision is the bottleneck, or your ability to follow up. So I think that's a really good way of looking at it, how marketing should be looked at. Not just marketing, but look at your delivery at the same time.
And then, of course, as marketing grows your business and grows your cash flow, then you start having capacity from a resource point of view to pay money to put systems in place. So once you've got some kind of marketing going and you're getting more demand, your cash flow should be increasing, which means that you should have money to spend on building a system. And the system then helps you manage the demand. And so you can see how these components all work in, it's a machine that works, and there are lots of components that have to work together. Most people just think about delivery, and then they think about marketing, and then they realize, oh, they're not coping, and then they want to pluck a system on there. Pluck, lovely South African word. But recognizing that a business is made up of components that are interdependent. They cannot operate independently. And that's where outsourcing can be risky, because you kind of create this external independent element that actually needs to be very integral to the business. That's why most businesses will eventually employ an in-house marketing manager or marketing assistant or business development manager. But again, it's understanding that you have to still manage that component in the business, which means the business owner has to understand how these different components work. You may not execute on those things, but you have to at least know how they work. And that's where the learning component is so key. Business owners have to constantly be learning about business and becoming more astute about how these components work together. And I guess that's where the coaching process is so useful, is it facilitates the learning process.
How often do you meet what you would call a successful business owner, where the marketing just doesn't exist or isn't there?
All the time. I mean, I work with businesses that are 50 years old that have no marketing capability. And they've built a phenomenal business based on relationship, but most of the business owners are at that bottleneck where the business is completely dependent on them. So that's also, the process of becoming a true business owner where the business works without you. Marketing facilitates that, and then systems, and then teams. So it's, those layers need to be built into the business. But it's surprising to me how many businesses still don't have a marketing capability. Most of them have outsourced it to some degree, but it's generally not the quality that they require. And all the marketing agencies out there can thank me for the amount of, I suppose, attention I'm putting on marketing. But I think most business owners don't understand the value of marketing. I often say marketing, because it's more of a creative function within the business, it's often seen as more of a feminine component to a business. And so it's often seen as not as important. The reality is that business is still quite patriarchal, and so the thinking around business is finance, operations, tech. Those components of the business are the more sort of masculine parts of a business, and so those are the ones that are emphasized. And interestingly, marketing and people are often outsourced or seen as secondary. And again, each of those components are equally essential in running a successful business. And so it's about valuing each of those components equally and having them work together in a way that actually facilitates the growth.
So if these businesses are 50 years old and they don't have a proper marketing strategy or implementation, how have they gotten to where they've gotten?
That's what I was saying. Most of them are built on relationships.
Okay.
And so that's where often businesses come to coaching, is they realize some of those relationships have aged. So it's often in generational businesses where the dad started the business and the dad built the business based on his relationships. And the business has a brand in the market, people are aware of it. But when there's a transition, the next generation doesn't necessarily have those relationships. And so suddenly there's how do we sustain this business? How do we keep it going? And that's where then marketing becomes something that is very useful, but because it hasn't been a capability that's been properly built into the business, it's a bit of a shock where suddenly they have to spend money on marketing. And again, I often see marketing budgets are often heavily focused on like sponsorships or giving out branded, gifts or that kind of thing. And there is a place for that. Thanking your customers with gifts is a, it's a powerful thing. And that's more about retaining current clients. But actually, when you're wanting to grow your business, you need new customers as well. And so that kind of marketing requires a bit of risk taking because you don't know what marketing activity will work for your business. And so it is a bit of a trial and error process. And that's where I find most business owners get frustrated because they have to spend money on something that they don't know if it's going to work or not. And that can feel like an expense. It's like wasted money. But it's actually school fees that have to be spent in order for the business to learn what marketing works for that business. So business owners have to understand that even though if you've been in business for 50 years, you still have to learn new things because the market's changed. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah. So, and I think one of the biggest examples for me was I was speaking to a friend who's a lawyer, and then she told me what her budget was for marketing, and I almost fell off my chair. And then I said, the next question was, okay, so what's your ROI on that? And then she said, well, we make this much. And I was like, well, there you go. It makes total sense to be spending that amount because your return is obviously what you're looking for in terms of the numbers. So it's actually, once you find something that works, you can just
do more of it.
Exactly. Double your budget and you'll get double your return on investment. So that's what I love about marketing is it does take time to figure out what works. So there is an element of testing and measuring, which either costs you in time or money. So there is that element. Once you've got it right, it's scalable and you can see really good results. So that's also something that I've really enjoyed about learning about marketing.
So I think just to end off from today, it's really the key thing in my mind is recognizing firstly that marketing is a valuable and essential component in any business. It takes time to figure out what marketing works, but really understanding that first and foremost, you want to have a product or service that is operational before you get too much into marketing. So make sure your delivery, you know what you're selling and why you're selling it, and ideally who you want to sell it to, so your target market. Using relationship marketing first, find 10 people who you know, like and trust, and who know, like and trust you, sell it to them. Therein lies the potential for growth because you can test whether people like it or not, and then begin with the different components of marketing. Digital marketing, more formalized network marketing, community-based marketing, the multiple different streams of marketing, and then deciding ideally how much budget you are going to spend on it because it is a perpetual thing. We give a benchmark of about 5% of turnover, so that means as your business grows, your marketing spend grows, which means your business grows. Being very careful about just outsourcing it to any service provider, which means you have to understand marketing to a certain extent to ensure that who you're using is managed correctly and you're getting your return on investment. And then I would say, just again, I think recognizing that marketing is a fundamental part of a business and doing it consistently is key.
That's great advice. I think anybody who takes that is now going to be ready to get going. No, seriously, we've literally put everything concisely into half an hour of just this is how you would do it and how you need to approach it, and don't make too many mistakes. Pick the right person who's going to help you if you're going to get help. Thanks for joining us on Becoming the Business. We hope today gave you something to chew on or talk about with someone you trust.
And if you're building something real, don't do it alone. We'll see you next time.